Have you ever wondered why some animals behave in ways that make absolutely no sense? My name is Claire Novak. I've been a wildlife officer with Ontario's Ministry of Natural Resources for 11 years now. I work the northern shores of Lake Superior, covering the stretch from Thunder Bay to Pukasqua National Park. It's a remote country, dense boreal forest, rocky coastline, islands that appear and disappear with the fog. Most people think my job is about checking fishing licenses and tracking bear populations. And yes, I do those things. But there's another part of my work. A part we don't discuss with outsiders. A part that has rules we follow exactly, even though those rules don't make scientific sense. Even though they contradict everything I learned in wildlife biology. If you stay until the end, I'll share those rules with you. The ones that determine which animals we track and which ones we avoid. The ones that explain why certain locations are marked on our maps with symbols that mean, do not investigate. The ones that have kept officers alive for generations. Because once you understand that the rules apply to animals too, you start to see patterns that can't be explained by normal animal behavior. I grew up in Thunder Bay. My grandfather was a trapper. My mother worked for Parks Canada. I spent my childhood in the bush, learning to read tracks and identify scat, and understand the language of the forest. After university, I joined the MNR. I did my training in Sault Ste. Marie. Came back north because this landscape was in my blood. Because I understood the wilderness in ways city-trained officers never would. My first 8 years were routine. I monitored moose populations, tagged bears, investigated illegal hunting, responding to human-wildlife conflicts. I knew my territory like I knew my own heartbeat. Every trail, every river, every spot where animals congregated in different seasons. I was good at my work. Won commendations. Earned the respect of the old-timers who'd been doing this for decades. But respect and knowledge only help with normal situations. Normal wildlife behavior. Normal ecological patterns. What I'm going to tell you goes beyond normal. Beyond what any textbook or training manual can prepare you for. Most of my work happens during daylight. But there are situations that require a nightly response. Injured animals, reported attacks, unusual activity that needs immediate investigation. Winter is especially demanding. That's when animals behave differently. When the cold changes everything. When we see patterns that shouldn't exist but do. I'm telling you this because credibility matters. I have a degree in wildlife biology. I've published research papers. I've testified in court as an expert witness. I'm not someone who believes in cryptids or supernatural phenomena. I'm a scientist. I document. I observe. I follow evidence. Everything I'm about to share is documented in our confidential files. Files that will never be made public because they raise questions we can't answer. Our regional office is small. Just outside Thunder Bay. 3 officers covering thousands of square kilometers. We keep detailed records of every animal sighting, every unusual behavior, every incident that deviates from expected patterns. Those records go back 90 years. I used to read the old reports during slow periods, looking for historical data, understanding how animal populations had changed over decades. Looking back, I realized I was seeing warnings I didn't understand. Entries that seemed odd but I dismissed as poor record-keeping or exaggeration from earlier eras. Notes about animals that don't photograph. Tracks that lead nowhere. Species behavior inconsistent with known patterns. I thought they were mistakes. Observer bias. Lack of scientific rigor. I was wrong. The first time I heard about the protocol was during a briefing with my supervisor. His name is Daniel Ostrowski. He's 61 years old. Been a wildlife officer for 38 years. Knows the superior shoreline better than anyone alive. He's methodical, data-driven, not the type to believe in anything he can't measure or track. It was late November. First heavy snow had fallen. We were reviewing winter assignments. Daniel was marking certain areas on our territory map. Red zones where we'd increase patrols. Yellow zones where we'd monitor but not intervene. And then he marked 3 areas in blue. These are protocol zones, he said, not looking up from the map. I'd never heard that term before. What's the protocol? He set down his pen, studied me for a long moment. How long have you been with us now, Claire? 11 years. And in those 11 years, have you ever encountered an animal that didn't behave the way it should? Not sick, not injured, just wrong somehow. I thought about it. There was a wolf last winter. Followed me for 3 kilometers. Never approached. Never retreated. Just maintained exactly 50 meters distance. Like it was escorting me. Daniel's expression changed. Did you report that? No. It didn't feel threatening. And wolves are curious animals. I thought. You thought it was normal curiosity. He pulled out a file. Handed it to me. Read this. Then we'll talk about what you should have done. The file contained reports from other officers. Dozens of them. Animals behaving in ways that violated everything we knew about wildlife behavior. A moose that appeared in the same spot every day for a month, facing the same direction, not eating or drinking. A raven that mimicked human speech with perfect clarity, saying the same phrase repeatedly. They're watching the shoreline. A pack of coyotes arranged in a perfect circle around a specific tree, not moving for 16 hours straight. Each report ended the same way. Protocol enacted. No further investigation. What is the protocol? I asked again. Daniel took the file back. It's what we do when we encounter animals that aren't following natural laws. When we see behavior that can't be explained by biology or ecology or anything we've studied, we document at distance. We mark the location. And we don't intervene. We don't investigate. We don't try to understand. Because every officer who's broken that rule has disappeared or come back changed. My skin prickled. Changed how? Some stopped talking. Just quit their jobs and moved away. Others became obsessed. Spent all their time trying to find those animals again. And a few. He trailed off. A few walked into the forest and never came back. Their trucks were found parked at trailheads. Their equipment laid out neatly. But the officers themselves? Gone. You're saying animals are. What? Luring people. Controlling them. I'm saying there are animals in our territory that don't follow the rules of nature. And there are rules we follow to stay safe around them. That's all you need to know right now. He pulled out a sheet of paper. These are the basic protocol guidelines. Study them. Memorize them. Starting next week, you'll be working in one of the blue zones. You'll see things that don't make sense. When you do, you follow the protocol. No exceptions. I looked at the paper. 12 rules written in precise, bureaucratic language. Rules that seemed absurd. Rules that contradicted my training. Rules that suggested the animals in protocol zones weren't entirely natural. But before I could read them carefully, my radio crackled. Unit 3, we have a report of a moose vehicle collision on Highway 17, kilometer marker 483. Animal is down but still alive. Requesting response. Daniel nodded at me. Take that. We'll continue this discussion tomorrow. But Claire, if you see anything unusual on that call, you document and leave. You don't engage. You don't try to help beyond standard procedure. Understood? I grabbed my keys. Understood. As I drove toward the highway, I kept thinking about those reports. about animals that didn't follow natural law, about officers who disappeared. It sounded like campfire stories, urban legends that field workers told to scare rookies. But Daniel wasn't the type to waste time on nonsense. And those reports had been detailed, specific, credible. I reached the collision site just before dusk. A pickup truck was pulled over on the shoulder. The driver, an older man, stood next to his damaged front end looking shaken but unhurt. And on the road about 20 meters ahead was the moose. It was a bull. Large. Maybe 600 kilograms. Lying on its side. I could see blood on the pavement. The impact had clearly been severe. This was standard protocol. Assess the animal's condition. Euthanize if necessary. Clear the roadway, file the report. I approached carefully. Moose are dangerous even when injured. This one wasn't moving. As I got closer, I could see it was breathing. Shallow, labored breaths. Its eyes were open, watching me. I knelt at a safe distance. Checked for obvious injuries. The impact had broken both front legs. Massive internal trauma was likely. This was a clear case. The animal was suffering. Euthanasia was the humane choice. I was reaching for my rifle when I noticed something strange. The moose was bleeding, but the blood wasn't pooling normally. It was running in perfectly straight lines, away from the body, like someone had drawn channels in the pavement for it to follow. 4 lines. North, south, east, west. Each one has exactly the same width. Each one extends about 3 meters before stopping abruptly. That was impossible. Blood doesn't flow in geometric patterns. It pools and spreads according to gravity and surface texture. But these lines were precise, deliberate, like they'd been painted. I stood up, backed away. I looked at the moose's eyes again. It was still watching me, not with the glazed, pain-filled stare of a dying animal, but with focus, purpose, like it was waiting for something, like it was aware in a way animals shouldn't be. I remembered Daniel's words, document and leave. I took photos, measured the bloodlines, note the exact position of the animal. Then I returned to my vehicle and called it in. Unit 3 to base. I need a protocol marker at Highway 17, kilometer 483. Moose vehicle collision with unusual characteristics. Requesting supervisor response. There was a pause. Then Daniel's voice. Confirmed. Stay with the scene but maintain distance from the animal. I'm en route. 20 minutes. I stayed in my truck. I watched the moose through my windshield. It didn't move. Didn't struggle. Just lay there breathing, watching. The bloodlines didn't spread or pool. They stayed exactly as I'd first seen them. Perfect geometric patterns that shouldn't exist. As twilight deepened, I noticed something else. Other animals were gathering. Ravens in the trees. Coyotes at the edge of the forest. A fox sitting perfectly still on the opposite shoulder. All of them facing the moose. All of them are silent. All of them watching with that same focused, purposeful intensity. This was my first real encounter with what Daniel called protocol situations. My first time seeing animals behave in ways that violated natural law. And as I sat there in my truck, watching a gathering that felt more like a ceremony than a wildlife response, I understood why the rules existed. Because whatever was happening on that highway wasn't about a moose that had been hit by a truck. It was about something else. Something that used animal bodies and animal behavior to achieve purposes I couldn't understand. Daniel arrived 23 minutes later. He assessed the scene through binoculars. Didn't approach the moose. Instead, he marked the location on his GPS, filed a specific code into his tablet. Then he got back in his truck and drove to where I was parked. "You did the right thing," he said. "Calling it in instead of handling it yourself. What happens now?" "Now we leave." The highway department will close this section overnight. By morning, the animal will be gone. The blood will be gone. Everything will be normal again. Gone where? He looked at me. That's not a question we ask. That's not a question we want answered. Because the officers who demanded answers, they're the ones who disappeared. He started to drive away, then stopped, rolled down his window. Tomorrow we'll go over the full protocol. All 12 rules. You'll learn what to look for, what to avoid, how to stay safe. Because you're working the blue zones now. And in those zones, the rules apply even to animals. I watched him leave. Then I sat there for another 10 minutes watching the moose, watching the ravens and coyotes and foxes. None of them moved. None of them made a sound. They just watched, waited, performed their role in whatever this was. Finally, I drove away, left them to their ceremony, left the moose to whatever fate awaited it, because I was starting to understand that there were things in the forest that didn't follow the natural order. Things that wore the shapes of animals but weren't entirely animal. Things that had their own rules, their own purposes. And my job was to recognize them, document them, and most importantly, leave them alone. Because in the blue zones along Lake Superior, the protocol applies even to animals. And the price for breaking protocol isn't just losing your job. It's losing yourself to whatever lives in the forest, whatever watches from behind animal eyes, whatever has been here longer than humans and will be here long after we're gone. The next morning I arrived at the office early. Daniel was already there with coffee, and the full protocol documentation spread across the conference table. The file was thick. Decades of reports, photographs that showed things I couldn't quite process, maps marked with hundreds of blue zones across northern Ontario. Before we start, Daniel said, I need you to sign this. He slid a form across the table. It was a non-disclosure agreement, but not the standard MNR version. This one had specific clauses about protocol incidents, about maintaining confidentiality, about agreeing to follow directives even when they contradicted standard wildlife management practices. I signed it. What choice did I have? I'd already seen too much. Good. He sat down. Now, the moose from last night. The highway department closed the road at midnight. When they reopened it at 6 a.m., the animal was gone. No blood. No evidence of the collision except the damage to the truck. Standard protocol resolution. Where did it go? We don't know. We don't track protocol animals once they leave the initial site. We mark the location. We note the date and time. We move on. He opened the file to a specific section. What I'm about to show you is 90 years of data, patterns we've identified, rules we've developed. This isn't folklore or superstition. This is documented observation across multiple officers and multiple decades. The first document was from 1934, a handwritten report about a wolf pack that appeared every winter solstice at the same location. 47 wolves. Always the same number. Always arranged in the same formation. Standing completely still for exactly 3 hours before disappearing into the forest. Still happens, Daniel said. Same location. Same number. We've tried to study them. Set up cameras. Tracking devices. Nothing works. Equipment fails. Batteries drain. Memory cards are corrupt. So we stopped trying. We just mark it on the calendar and stay away that night. He showed me more reports. A family of beavers that built dams in perfect geometric patterns. A lynx that appeared to individuals who were about to die, always exactly 72 hours before the death occurred. A flock of Canada geese that flew in formations that spelled out symbols no one could identify. The animals in protocol zones aren't normal, Daniel explained. They might look normal, They might even behave normally most of the time, but they're following different rules. They're part of something we don't understand. And when humans interfere, bad things happen. What kind of bad things? He pulled out another file. This one contained personnel records. Officers who'd worked in protocol zones over the decades. I recognized some names from the old reports I'd read. Next to each name was a notation. Resigned. Transferred. Missing. Deceased under unusual circumstances. Margaret Chun, Daniel read, worked in the Nipigon sector. Excellent officer. In 1987, she encountered a moose exhibiting protocol behavior. Instead of following the procedure, she tried to tag it. I wanted to track it, see where it went. 3 days later, she walked into her supervisor's office, handed in her badge and said, "They're not animals. They're wearing animal shapes, but they're not animals." Then she moved to Calgary, refuses to discuss what happened, won't return phone calls from anyone associated with MNR. He flipped to another page. Robert Tremblay, 2003, found a group of ravens arranged in a circle around a specific tree. Thought they were feeding on something. Approached to investigate. The ravens didn't scatter. They just turned their heads in unison and looked at him. He said later it felt like dozens of minds examining him through those eyes. Looking for something. Testing him. He finished his shift, drove home, and never came back. I work in an office now. In Toronto. As far from the forest as he could get. And the ones who didn't resign? Daniel closed the file. Some disappeared. Trucks found abandoned. No sign of struggle. No evidence of where they went. Just gone. Others came back different. Stopped sleeping. Stopped talking to their families. Spent all their time in the bush, looking for something they couldn't name. Eventually, they'd walk into the forest and not come back. This sounds like psychosis. Like the isolation and stress of the job affected them. That's what we tell the public when we have to explain a disappearance. Environmental factors. Mental health crisis. Wildlife attack. But we know better. Because every single case follows the same pattern. Officer encounters protocol animal. Officer violates protocol by engaging or investigating. The officer either quits immediately or becomes obsessed. There's no other outcome. Not in 90 years of records. He poured more coffee. I've been doing this for 38 years. In that time, I've seen protocol incidents maybe 40 times. I followed the procedure every single time. I'm still here. Still sane. Still able to do my job. The officers who broke the protocol, none of them are in the field anymore. That's not a coincidence. I looked at the maps. Blue zones scattered across the territory. Some small. Some covering dozens of square kilometers. How do we know which areas are protocol zones? Experience. Observation. Any location where we consistently see behavior that violates natural law gets marked. We review the zones quarterly. Add new ones as needed. Remove ones that have been quiet for several years. It's an ongoing process. And the rules? You mentioned 12 rules yesterday. Yes. He pulled out the sheet I glimpsed the day before. These are the core protocol guidelines. Follow them exactly and you'll be fine. Violate them and you risk becoming another file in this cabinet. He slid the paper across. I read the first rule. Rule 1. Animals exhibiting synchronized behavior involving 3 or more individuals require immediate protocol documentation. Do not approach. Do not attempt to disrupt the behavior. Document from maximum safe distance and vacate the area. Rule 2. Animals that do not flee from human approach despite no prior habituation to humans are protocol cases. Maintain a minimum 50-meter distance. Do not attempt to tag, track, or study. Document and report. Rule 3. Any animal found in a location where that species should not naturally occur requires protocol assessment. Do not attempt to relocate or capture. Document position, mark location, and leave the area. I kept reading. The rules covered everything from unusual migration patterns to animals that appeared to communicate across species. Animals that showed no fear but also no aggression. Animals whose tracks disappeared without explanation. Animals that appeared in photographs with visual distortions around them. The rules seem very specific, I said. Like they're describing exact scenarios. Because they are. Every rule was written because an officer encountered that exact situation and either followed intuition or broke it. The ones who followed their gut instinct and stayed away, they wrote these rules. The ones who engaged, they're in the missing persons files. He stood up. I'm going to give you 3 days to study this material. Read every report. Study the maps. Understand the rules. Then you start patrols in the blue zones. You'll be working in the Pukasqua coastal sector. It's active right now. Winter brings more protocol incidents in that area. Why? We don't know. Theory is that whatever controls these animals becomes more active in winter, or that the animals need to gather energy for hibernation, and whatever process they're part of requires that gathering. But those are just guesses. We don't really know why. We just know the pattern exists. For the next 3 days, I did nothing but study. I read reports that made my skin crawl. I looked at photographs that seemed normal at first but revealed disturbing patterns on closer inspection. I memorized the locations of every blue zone in my new territory. One report stuck with me. From 2011, an officer named James Holbrook had encountered a bear, black bear, about 150 kilograms, standing on its hind legs in a clearing, not threatening, not foraging, just standing, facing east, completely motionless. Holbrook had watched for 20 minutes. The bear never moved, never shifted position, never even blinked, just stood there like a statue. Finally, Holbrook had approached within 30 meters. That's when he noticed the bear wasn't breathing. Not dead, just not breathing. Its eyes were open. Its body was upright, but no rise and fall of the chest. No visible respiration. Like a taxidermy mount someone had placed in the forest. Holbrook had backed away, documented the location, filed the report. 2 weeks later, another officer checked the same clearing. The bear was gone, but there were symbols carved into the trees around where it had stood. Symbols that matched ones found at other protocol sites across Ontario. Holbrook's final note in the report. Whatever I saw wasn't a bear. It was something using a bear's shape. Something that doesn't need to breathe because it isn't alive in any way we understand. On the 4th day, Daniel drove me out to the Pukasqua sector. We spent the day driving the territory. He showed me the blue zones, explained which areas were most active, which ones had produced the most incidents. This zone, he said, pointing to a spot on the map near Otter Island, has had 47 protocol events in the last 15 years. More than anywhere else in the region. We don't know why. The ecology isn't unusual. The geology is standard for this area. But something about this location attracts them. Attracts you. Whatever organizes the animals. Whatever gives them their instructions. Whatever they're part of. He looked at me. You'll work in this zone twice a week. Tuesday and Friday patrols. You'll see things. When you do, you document and leave. You don't investigate. You don't try to help or intervene. You observe and report. Can you do that? Yes. Good. Because tomorrow is Tuesday. Your first patrol. And I guarantee you'll encounter something that makes you want to break the protocol. The temptation will be strong. These are animals. They might look distressed or injured or trapped. Every instinct you have as a wildlife officer will tell you to help. But you can't. You won't. Because the moment you engage, you become part of whatever process they're involved in. That night I barely slept. I kept thinking about the reports, about officers who disappeared, about animals that weren't entirely animals, about rules that kept us safe from something we didn't understand. The next morning I drove to the Pukasqua sector alone. It was early December. Fresh snow had fallen overnight. The forest was quiet, beautiful. Nothing looked threatening or unusual. I started my patrol route at 7 a.m. For the first 2 hours, everything was normal. I checked winter deer yards, looked for wolf tracks, documented a beaver dam. Standard wildlife officer work. Then around 9:30 I saw them, a group of coyotes, 7 of them, sitting in a perfect circle in a frozen marsh, perfectly spaced, all facing inward toward a point at the center of the circle, not moving, not hunting, not interacting, just sitting. This was Rule 1, synchronized behavior. 3 or more individuals, immediate protocol documentation. I stopped my truck, got out my binoculars. They were about 200 meters away. I could see them clearly. 7 coyotes. No visible injuries. No signs of disease. Just sitting in geometric precision in the middle of a frozen marsh. I took photographs, marked the GPS coordinates, made notes about their positions and behavior. Then, following the protocol, I should have left immediately. But I didn't. Not right away. Because as I watched, one of the coyotes turned its head, looked directly at me. And even from 200 meters away, even through binoculars, I could see its eyes. They weren't the eyes of a coyote. They were too aware, too knowing, too focused. The coyote held my gaze for maybe 5 seconds. Then it turned back to face the center of the circle. The message was clear. We know you're watching. We allow it. But do not come closer. I got back in my truck, hands shaking, drove away from the marsh, called Daniel. I just encountered a protocol situation. 7 coyotes in synchronized position. I documented and left. Good. Where? I gave him the coordinates. They were arranged in a perfect circle, and one of them looked at me, like it knew I was there, like it was deciding whether to allow me to observe. Did you feel compelled to approach? Any unusual thoughts or urges? I thought about it. No, just normal curiosity, the kind any wildlife officer would have. That's good. Means you weren't selected. Sometimes they choose specific people. Try to draw them in. If that had happened, you would have felt an overwhelming need to get closer, to join the circle, to understand what they were doing. The fact that you felt normal means you're safe. For now, what were they doing? We don't know. We see these gatherings regularly, different species, different numbers, but always the same geometric precision, always facing a central point. We've tried to figure out what's at those central points. When we investigate after the animals leave, we find nothing. No food, no scent marks, no physical evidence, just normal ground. So what's the purpose? That's the question we stopped asking, because asking it leads to trying to answer it, and trying to answer it leads to obsession, and obsession leads to disappearing into the forest. He paused. Claire, you did exactly right. You documented. You left. That's the job. That's how you stay safe. Keep doing exactly that and you'll be fine. I continued my patrol. Saw 2 more unusual incidents that day. A raven that followed my truck for 15 kilometers, maintaining exactly the same distance the whole time, and a deer standing in the middle of a frozen lake, facing the mainland, not moving for the entire hour I observed it. Both times I documented and left. Both times I felt that strange awareness from the animals, like they knew they were being watched, like they were performing their roles with full knowledge of my presence. By the time I returned to the office that evening, I understood what Daniel had been trying to tell me. The animals in protocol zones weren't mindless. They weren't sick or confused. They were doing exactly what they were supposed to do, following rules we couldn't perceive, participating in processes we couldn't understand. And our job wasn't to figure them out. It was to recognize them, avoid them, and let them continue whatever they were doing. Because the alternative, engaging with them, trying to control or study them, led to outcomes far worse than simply not knowing. As I filed my reports, I realized something that made my skin crawl. The protocol wasn't really about protecting us from dangerous animals. It was about protecting us from becoming part of whatever the animals were part of, from being absorbed into that system, from losing our humanity to whatever intelligence organized those perfect circles and geometric patterns. And tomorrow I'll be back out there, back in the blue zones, back among animals that followed rules even we were forced to follow, rules that applied to everything, even to us. The next morning, Daniel called me into his office before my patrol. He had a laptop open showing a map of my sector. Several new blue zones had been added overnight. We had reports from ice fishermen, he said. 3 separate groups saw unusual animal behavior on the lake ice near Black Bay Peninsula, all within the same 6-hour window. That's enough to designate it as a new protocol zone. What did they see? Wolves, walking in single file across the ice. 9 of them, perfect spacing between each animal, moving in a straight line from the mainland to one of the islands. The fishermen said it looked like a military formation. Precise, coordinated. When the wolves reached the island, they all turned around in unison and walked back the same way. Same spacing, same precision. Then they disappeared into the forest. That's unusual but not impossible. Wolves do cross ice to reach islands. True. But here's the part that made us designate it as protocol. When the wolves turned around on the island, the fishermen said they all sat down simultaneously, faced the mainland, and howled in perfect harmony for exactly 60 seconds. Not the normal pack howl where individuals start and stop at different times. Perfect unison, like they were one voice coming from 9 throats. He pulled up photographs the fisherman had taken. The images showed exactly what he described. 9 wolves in perfect formation. The spacing between them was identical to within centimeters. You could draw a straight line through all 9 animals. The fishermen were experienced. They've been on that lake for decades. They know normal wolf behavior. This wasn't it. So we mark it. Add it to your patrol route. And if you see anything similar, you know what to do. I nodded. Document and leave. Exactly. He closed the laptop. Now, about the rules. You've been following the basic ones. But there are additional protocols you need to know. Ones that deal with specific situations. He handed me another document. This one was shorter but somehow more disturbing. These are the advanced guidelines, Daniel explained. Situations that are rarer but more dangerous. You need to know them before you encounter them. I read the first advanced rule. Advanced Protocol 1. If you encounter an animal that speaks human words, do not respond. Do not acknowledge that you heard it. Document the exact words spoken and leave immediately. Do not return to that location for 30 days. I looked up. Animals that speak? Ravens mostly. Sometimes crows. We've had 3 confirmed cases in the last decade. Birds that speak in perfect human speech. Full sentences. Complete thoughts. Not mimicry like a parrot. These birds use language contextually. They respond to human presence with appropriate statements. What do they say? Daniel's expression was grim. The last one was in 2019. An officer named Sarah Kim encountered a raven near Rossport. She was checking a campsite. The raven was sitting on a picnic table. When she approached, it said, clear as day, "You should leave before dark. They gather when the sun goes down." Sarah thought someone was playing a prank, looked around for a speaker or hidden person, but it was the raven. It tilted its head and repeated, "They gather when the sun goes down. You should leave." Did she leave? Yes, but not immediately. She tried to approach the raven, get a closer look. That's when it said, "I'm warning you because you're new. Next time I won't warn you. None of us will." Then it flew away. None of us? It said us? That's what she reported. She documented the incident and left. We marked the location. She didn't return for 30 days as required. When she finally went back, everything was normal. No unusual activity. No speaking ravens. But she transferred to a different sector. Said she couldn't work that area anymore, knowing that something was watching through animal eyes. Something that could speak if it chose to. I looked at the next advanced rule. Advanced Protocol 2. If you find animal tracks that form patterns, symbols, or written words, photograph from maximum distance and evacuate the area immediately. Do not follow the tracks. Do not attempt to identify the animal. Report to supervisor within 1 hour. This happens. I asked. Twice in my career. Both times deer tracks. But instead of normal walking patterns, the tracks formed shapes. Geometric designs. In one case, something that looked like letters. We photographed from a distance. Marked the location. By the next day, new snow had covered everything. We never found out what animal made those tracks or why. He pointed to another rule. Advanced Protocol 3. If an animal approaches you and maintains eye contact while remaining outside normal flight distance, you are being evaluated. Remain calm. Do not run. Do not speak. Slowly back away while maintaining visual contact. If the animal follows while maintaining the same distance, continue retreat until you reach your vehicle. If it allows you to leave, document and report. If it closes the distance, you have been selected. Follow Emergency Protocol Alpha. What's Emergency Protocol Alpha? Daniel pulled out a red folder. This is for situations where you've been directly engaged by a protocol animal, where it's chosen you specifically. It's rare. Maybe once every 5 years across all of Ontario. But it happens. And when it does, you need to know exactly what to do. He opened the folder. Inside was a single page with clear instructions. Emergency Protocol Alpha. Do not resist or flee suddenly. Continue slow retreat while maintaining eye contact. Call for immediate supervisor backup on the emergency channel. If the animal continues to approach despite retreat, assume a non-threatening posture. Sit or kneel. Avoid direct stare. Wait for supervisor arrival. Do not leave the area alone. If an animal makes physical contact, you will be placed on immediate medical leave and monitored for behavioral changes for 90 days. Physical contact? My voice came out quieter than I intended. We've had 4 cases where protocol animals made physical contact with officers. 3 of those officers had to be removed from field work permanently. They developed what we call integration symptoms. Compulsive behavior. Obsessive thoughts about returning to the forest. Dreams where they experienced the world through animal senses. In the 4th case, the officer disappeared 3 months after contact. Her truck was found at a trailhead. Her equipment was neatly arranged on the hood. She was never seen again. What happens if you shoot the animal? In self-defense? Daniel's expression darkened. That's addressed in Advanced Protocol 4. You don't want to know what happens. But the short version is, protocol animals can't be killed by conventional means. Officers who've tried report that bullets pass through the animal without effect. Or the animal falls, appears dead, then stands up moments later. We had one case where an officer emptied his rifle into an approaching bear. Every shot hit. The bear didn't react, just kept walking forward. The officer fled to his truck and got out safely. When we checked the location the next day, we found 9 spent casings. No blood, no bear, no tracks beyond where the confrontation occurred. So we're defenseless if they decide to attack? They don't attack. Not in the way you're thinking. They're not predators hunting prey. They're something else. If they select you, it's not to kill you. It's to change you. To make you part of whatever they are. And the only defense against that is following the protocol. Maintaining distance. Not engaging. He pulled out another document. These are situation-specific protocols. For ice conditions, for island encounters, for coastal zones. Study them. Memorize them. Because tomorrow you're going to encounter something that will test your resolve to follow these rules. How do you know? Because activity in your sector is increasing. We're seeing more incidents per week than we usually see in a month. Something is happening. Some kind of cycle or gathering. And it always peaks in mid-December. We're 10 days away from that peak. Which means the next 10 days will be the most active period you'll experience all year. He stood up. Go home. Get rest. Tomorrow your real education. Everything you've seen so far is minor. Wolves in formation. Coyotes in circles. That's standard protocol work. What's coming is different. More intense. More direct. And you need to be ready to follow the rules no matter what you see. No matter how much your training tells you to intervene. Because intervention means integration. And integration means you stop being Claire Novak and become something else. That night I couldn't eat. I sat at my kitchen table studying the protocols, reading case files, looking at photographs of tracks that formed symbols, of animals that stood in impossible positions, of officers who'd broken protocol and paid the price. One case file included a journal, written by an officer named Thomas Wright in 1997. He'd been working the marathon sector when he encountered a moose exhibiting protocol behavior. Instead of documenting and leaving, he tried to help what he thought was an injured animal. His journal entries started normally, professional observations. Then they changed. He started writing about hearing voices in the forest, feeling watched, having dreams where he ran through the forest on 4 legs, seeing through moose eyes, understanding a language that had no words. The final entry was dated 3 weeks after his initial encounter. I understand now. They're not animals. They're part of something vast. Something that's been here since before humans. Something that uses animal forms to interact with our world. They've shown me things. Beautiful things. Terrible things. Tomorrow I'm going back. I won't be returning. This is my choice. Tell my family I'm sorry. But I've been selected and I accept. His truck was found the next day. Keys in the ignition. Doors unlocked. His uniform folded neatly on the driver's seat. Thomas Wright was never seen again. I closed the file. I looked out my window at the dark forest beyond the town. Somewhere out there, animals were performing their roles, following their rules. And tomorrow I'd be among them again, documenting their strange precision, their impossible awareness, their purposes I would never understand. The rules existed for a reason. 90 years of observation, dozens of officers, hundreds of incidents. The rules were written in the experiences of people who'd encountered something beyond natural law. Some had followed the rules and survived. Others had broken them and disappeared. I would follow the rules. I would document and leave. I would not engage. I would not try to understand, because understanding meant becoming part of what they were. And I wasn't ready to stop being human, wasn't ready to join whatever existed in the spaces between the trees, wearing animal shapes, following rules even we had to obey. The protocol applied to everyone, even to those of us who were supposed to be in control, even to those of us who thought we understood the wild. Because the true wild, the one that existed beneath the surface of normal ecology, followed rules we were only beginning to recognize. Rules that had always been there. Rules that would remain long after we were gone. And tomorrow I will see those rules in action. I would witness animals following instructions from something I couldn't perceive. And I would do my job. Observe, document, and most importantly, leave them alone. Because that was the only way to survive in the blue zones. The only way to work among animals that were and weren't animals. The only way to maintain the boundary between humans and whatever existed on the other side. The rules applied even to animals. But more importantly, they applied to us. And breaking them meant losing everything that made us who we were. The next morning I found them. 6 deer standing in a frozen creek bed, arranged in 2 parallel lines of 3, facing each other. Not moving, not foraging. Their breaths were visible in the cold air, synchronized. All exhaling at exactly the same moment. I documented from my truck. I took photographs, marked coordinates. Then I saw what was between them. Patterns in the snow. Symbols drawn with precision no hoof could create. Circles and lines that looked almost like language. I left immediately. Called Daniel. I found advanced protocol too. Tracks forming symbols. Good. You left? Yes. Perfect. That's 3 major incidents this week. The peak is coming. Over the next 5 days, the encounters intensified. Animals everywhere performing impossible coordinations. A fox that followed my exact route from the previous day, stepping in my old footprints with perfect precision. Ravens that spelled out shapes in the sky with their flight patterns. Wolves that appeared at the edges of my vision, always watching, never approaching. I followed the protocol every time. Document and leave. Never engage. Never investigate. But it was wearing on me. I stopped sleeping well. I started seeing patterns everywhere. Started wondering if normal animals were normal or if they were all part of it. The boundary between regular wildlife and protocol animals was blurring in my mind. Daniel noticed. You need a break. 3 days off. Get away from the territory. I'm fine. That's what they all say before integration symptoms start. Take the time. That's an order. On my 2nd day off, I couldn't stay away. I drove back to the Pukasqua sector. Just to look. Just to see if anything was happening. I wasn't on duty. Wasn't official. Just curious. That's when I found it. A moose standing on the ice of Black Bay. The same location where the wolves had been. It was facing the mainland. Completely still. And as I watched through binoculars, it turned its head. Looked directly at me 300 meters away. And I felt it. The pull. The invitation. The sense that if I walked out there, if I approached, I would finally understand. Finally know what they know. Finally see what they saw. I wanted to go. Every part of me wanted to step onto that ice and walk toward that moose. To be selected. To be changed. To be part of something vast and ancient. Instead, I started my truck. Drove away. Hands shaking. Heart pounding. Because I'd felt it. The selection process begins, and I'd barely had the strength to resist. I called Daniel from the highway 20 kilometers away. I almost broke the protocol. I went back on my day off and I almost walked out to a moose that was selecting me. Where are you now? Driving back to Thunder Bay. Good. Keep driving. Don't stop. When you get home, you're on mandatory leave. 2 weeks. And you're not going back to the blue zones. I'm reassigning you. But, Claire, you felt the pull. That means you're vulnerable. That means the next time you might not resist. I've seen this before. The only way to break it is complete separation. You're done with protocol work. Effective immediately. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt lost. Like I was being cut off from something important. Something I needed to understand. And that feeling, that sense of loss over being separated from the protocol zones, told me Daniel was right. I'd been too close. Too exposed. Another week and I might have walked into the forest and never come back. 2 weeks passed. I stayed in Thunder Bay. Avoided the forest. I tried to return to normal life. The pull gradually faded. The dreams stopped. The compulsion to return to the blue zones weakened. But I never forgot. Never stopped knowing what was out there. Animals that followed rules we could barely perceive. Patterns that suggested intelligence vast and alien. A system we were part of whether we acknowledged it or not. I work in a different sector now. Farther south. Fewer protocol incidents. I still see unusual things occasionally. Still document and leave. Still follow the rules. But I don't work in the blue zones anymore. Don't patrol the places where the boundary between animal and other is thinnest. Because I learned what the protocol really protects us from. Not dangerous animals. Not physical harm. But transformation. Integration. The loss of self that comes from getting too close to something that wears animal shapes but isn't animal. Something that's been here longer than us. Something that will remain after we're gone. The rules apply even to animals. But they apply to us too. And the most important rule is the one they don't write down. Know when you're too close. Know when to step back. Know when to accept that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. Because in the blue zones along the Great Lakes, something ancient moves through animal bodies. Something that organizes and directs in purposes we can't understand. And our job isn't to control it or comprehend it. Our job is to recognize it, respect it, and leave it alone. That's the protocol. That's how we survive. That's how we maintain the boundary between humans and whatever else shares this wild space with us. And as long as we follow those rules, as long as we remember that the rules apply even to animals, even to us, we stay safe. But I still dream sometimes. Dreams where I stand on frozen lake ice. Dreams where a moose watches me from a distance. Dreams where I take that first step forward. And in those dreams I always wonder, what would I have become if I'd kept walking? What do they know that we don't? What exists on the other side of that transformation? I'll never know. And that's exactly how it should be. Because the officers who found out never came back to tell us. They're out there still, perhaps. Part of the pattern. Part of the system. No longer human but not quite animal either. Something else. Something that follows the rules that apply to everything in the deep forest. Even to us.